found you running from your past. You found me crippled from the last. So conflicted, cause I've always said it's not like me to fall quite this fast. But there's no current there to fight. It's reflecting green tonight. Way too often I get lost in what you're saying, awestruck and mesmerized. Don't wanna tell you what I've been thinking, just in case you're thinking it too. Never say forever, baby, 'cause I don't wanna damage what we have. I've been dreaming way too long now for somebody to pick me from the crowd. And I still remember that sunset drive. Never say forever, baby. Never say forever. I couldn't resist you from the start. I'm playing safe but falling hard. You know you've got quite a way with words, electrifying me. You're my everything. I know you've got quite a way with words, intoxicating me. You're my everything. Don't wanna tell you what I've been thinking, 'cause I know you're thinking it too. Never say forever, baby, 'cause I don't wanna damage what we have. I've been dreaming way too long now for somebody to pick me from the crowd. And I still remember that sunset drive. Never say forever, baby. Never say forever. Na 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 na. Never say. I know. Oh, you are everything I've been searching for. Oh, I see something I've never believed before. Never say forever, baby, 'cause I don't wanna damage what we have. I've been dreaming way too long now for somebody to pick me from the crowd. And I still remember that sunset drive. Never say forever, baby. Never say forever, baby, 'cause I don't wanna damage what we have. I've been dreaming way too long now for somebody to pick me from the crowd. And I still remember that sunset drive. Never say forever, baby. Never say forever. Na 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 na. Never say forever. Na 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 na. Never say forever. I made a mistake, and I should have told you that day. 1 year gone, and I still find you stuck in my mind. If you let me, I'd like to be stuck in your mind. This blue love could have easily been true love. What an empty thing. All right. Welcome, everybody, to the live stream. Hope everyone's having a good Thursday afternoon or evening or morning, depending on where you are. I'm going to go ahead and switch it over to the video view here. And let's see. There we are. I think Jake's there.
There he is.
All right.
Coming up from
Hey,
the
what's up?
depths. So, Jake, thanks so much for joining us here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, man, absolutely. So, a little bit of background. My name is Kevin Duthu. I'm in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm a manufacturer's rep for a lot of different brands, Allen and Heath, Shure, QSC. And Jake is a good friend of mine who also lives in Nashville. And today we are practicing extreme social distancing. We're actually about 25 miles apart. So I think that meets the CDC guidelines.
Yeah, just about.
Hopefully. So I kind of asked Jake if he would be down to do this a couple weeks ago because, as you know, a lot of, sound engineers are, it really sucks, but, a lot of us are not doing a whole lot right now. And I'm trying to think of ways to pass the time. And, what better way just to sit back and just kind of chill and just talk about, gear. We're all sound engineers. We're a bunch of nerds, right? We love talking about gear. We love talking about how'd you get the vocal to do this, or how do you get the kick drum to sound like this. So let's just freaking hang and talk about some gear and talk about you know what made you successful, and some best practices and some of the gear you use and all that kind of stuff. And we already have questions rolling in, so that's awesome. So without further ado, let's go ahead and just kick it off. So cool. I've got some questions here that people have submitted via we had a Reddit post, we had some Instagram comments, we had some Facebook comments. So we've kind of compiled everything, and then I am a next level nerd. Thank you, Jeff. But we kind of compiled everything in a list of questions, and we'll just kind of run through them, and then we'll take some questions from the chat. I already see some. We got some coming in here, so let's go ahead and kick it off. So, Jake, if you wouldn't mind, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, your musical background, and how did you become a sound engineer?
All right, I'll keep this as short as I can so we can get to actual mixing stuff. But I'm from Cary, North Carolina. And I went to Belmont here in Nashville for college in 2007. And I graduated in 2011. I was a music business major with a production emphasis. And I guess I started out just getting into music, playing guitar and singing. I played piano, took piano lessons, played trombone all throughout middle school and high school.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I still have it right over there. I haven't, my embouchure is terrible though. I haven't played in many, many years. But I learned how to read sheet music and bass clef, with trombone. And, I listened to a lot of pop punk growing up, a lot of emo music, some hardcore stuff.
Like, what was your favorite pop punk band?
Man, I basically everything on Drive Through Records. I listened to Fueled by Ramen, but like Drive Through Records, that was kind of the indie, like emo pop punk record label that I listened to everything on there. So there's a lot of good stuff and a lot of questionable stuff that I listened to. I don't think that helped my ear.
Oh no, some of those mixes back then were just
so maybe that put me behind the curve because of that. But I also listened to a lot of NSYNC, Backstreet Boys, all of that, really like the top 40 pop stuff as a kid. I loved that stuff. And I think that was also just the songwriting, so hooky and catchy.
And gang vocals in pop punk is just, nothing gets me more psyched than just, hi.
Man, the screamo stuff I was into. But so I played guitar and I wrote music and I sang in my own band in high school. Our name was In Our Own Words, a nice emo name for you there.
Was it like an N and then an R?
No, that wasn't hip yet. No, we spelled it out with correct grammar. Yeah. But yeah, anyways, we recorded our own music. Like I started out with Quartz Audio Master freeware with like 4 tracks or something. And so I didn't have any analog equipment, but I was doing what people would do back in the day with analog equipment, having to sum together tracks in order to record more than 4 things, you know? So I'd record 4 things and then mix that, put it on one track, record 3 more things. And I didn't even realize what I was doing. I was just doing it out of necessity. And I didn't even have I didn't know Pro Tools existed, and it might not have when I probably did. I don't know. I didn't start using Pro Tools until 2007 when I went to college. But anyways, that's how I got into recording, just with a terrible like computer mic, one of those little flat discs. That's probably $10. You know, that was just what we had at the family computer. And I loved getting to create music, you know, from scratch. And that's what drew me to Belmont. And at that point, I was introduced to live sound at that point. I was recording everyone I could in my dorm room and like mixing demos, recording demos. And sophomore year, my roommate, Caleb, who plays drums for a band called Tyler Bryant and the Shakedown, asked me to come on tour with them that summer. And that was like 2009, I guess, the summer of 2009. So that's when I started touring. And I had no idea what I was doing. First show, I was a wreck of nerves, but I got through it. And I quickly realized like I needed to be reading the manual for every console that we were going to have, because I was just using venue consoles and we're playing clubs and everything. There were a lot of analog consoles, maybe a few digital consoles, but at that point, all of the clubs we were playing had they had Allen Heath analog consoles or Soundcraft.
Yeah, all the GL or something.
Yeah.
GL 2400s.
And outboard gear, you know, and ironically, my first time really using outboard gear was touring in those clubs. Because recording, I would just use my laptop and Pro Tools. And I had access to studios at Belmont. So I got to use some of the outboard gear there, but I wasn't tweaking it and actually like doing full mixes on that. It was just tracking, and like guessing. It's like, as long as I get sound out the other end of the microphone, I was happy. But live, yeah, I was actually having to dial stuff in and figure that out. Yeah, I think that's some background information. That was 11 years ago. And I've just continued to work for other artists and slowly, you know, get bigger and bigger. And people trust me with more and more responsibility.
Nice.
As a front of house engineer.
I think the first time I met you, you were mixing at 3rd and Lindsley.
When was that?
Is that right? Was it 3rd and Lindsley?
Do you remember who it was?
I don't. I just remember that. So
I don't remember when we met though, because that could have been 11 years ago. It could have been.
It was a long time ago. Because, so for those of you who don't know, Jake's wife and my wife went to high school together. So that's how Jake and I met. And one day Kristen was really excited to introduce us to her new boyfriend. And that was when we went to go meet him up at, I'm pretty sure it was 3rd and Lindsley.
Huh.
And I remember walking in the room and just being like, wow, okay, so this guy's legit. So it sounded great. So, you know, obviously you came from, you know, first studio background, then live, which I feel like, which is what a lot of sound engineers have done. But with previous and current studio experience, how did that shape your gear choice for live sound? You know, stuff that you wanted to see in your rack, or when digital consoles started moving out, like what did you want to see in your effects rack, or you know?
Yeah. Honestly, just when you're in the studio and you have a computer, you have anything you want at your fingertips in terms of plugins. And analog gear is just whatever you have at that particular studio. But I was spoiled with all the wave stuff, mixing studio, recording. So when I started touring, you couldn't get any plugins on any of the platforms at that point. You could have waves on a few consoles. But the C6, the Wave C6, that's my kind of go-to plugin for multi-band compression. And something I early on, like started using a lot in studio mixes. And it wasn't until like 4 or 5 years ago that I started using that live. But it's just, I don't know. I've always been kind of I like to keep things simple. And so touring wise, I've never tried to introduce more equipment or more plugins or gear than I need to make a good mix. And I've always felt like I can have a really solid mix with mostly onboard EQ and compression, as long as there's at least a 4-band parametric EQ on every channel with filters, like a high pass, low pass, and a compressor and a de-esser for vocal channels, and multi-band compression on the vocals. I'm happy. And I mean, the multi-band thing is relatively new. When I started mixing, we didn't have that. So I've been using waves the last 4 or 5 years, and most recently with the D-Live, they've got the Dyne 8, which eliminates the need to have a C6 or waves plugins at all for me. So personally, I'm okay not having anything other than like the onboard stuff when it comes to Allen and Heath D-Live. And I'm not just saying that to plug Allen and Heath, but it's one of the only consoles that has a really good sounding multi-band compressor built in.
Yeah, it's almost like a C8. So I think the C6 is 3-band dynamic EQ and compression. The Dyne 8 is 4-band EQ and compression.
Yeah.
So I know Jake's got Director pulled up on his machine here, so maybe we'll get into that.
Yeah, in a little bit. We'll pull it up.
Yeah. Let's see. So I was going to ask you what you're currently mixing on, but you just said D-Live, so we covered that. Regarding, either...
Well, I can hit that actually, because what I am using is atypical. I have a C1500 for the Surface, which is the tiny, it's 12 faders. And actually I'll pull this up. I'll pull up, because I do have my latest show pulled up for Cory Wong. So this is my main layer that I'm mixing on. So here's why it's atypical. Most people have are more comfortable, and I'm more comfortable honestly with more faders than 12. So I have kind of figured out my workflow to make this comfortable and make it happen. Basically I've got drums. These are my main instruments. Like he has horns. These are guest horns. His guitar, which that's a stereo channel, I believe. Also, I gotta apologize. It's been like 2 months since I've opened this.
I think it's been 2 months for almost everybody, because it's like, what is it today? Like March 97th?
Oh yeah, something like that.
Like the longest March ever.
And this is a little messy. Honestly, I'm looking forward to Drew's session, because I want to see how he's got stuff laid out. It's probably way better than I do, but this right here illustrates how I like to use any fader layer on a console. And one thing, like any console I use, I want to have a custom fader layer that's like my main layer I live on for 90% of the show. So I like to have my vocals on my left hand, and in this case they're on the right side. But I've got my left hand on Cory's vocal, or my left hand on whatever instrument is like currently soloing. If there's a guitar solo, I'm gonna be riding this fader the whole time, or keys or synth or whatever. And then my right hand, and for Cory this isn't as much of a thing, because we don't have a lead vocalist on most of the show. But when we do, like say Phoebe is singing, I have my right hand on the vocal verb and vocal delay, and so I'm riding that, and my left hand riding main vocal level. And so that's consistent.
That's cool. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, that's consistent with like any console I've ever used. And analog consoles, like back in the day, a lot of times the effects returns would be on the right hand side of the console, and just the way people normally lay out a big analog console, like a 48 channel analog console. You start with drums on the left hand side and make your way of the vocals towards the end, which end up being like, I don't know, channel 15 or channel 20 or something like that. And then over on the right-hand side, you got your stereo returns. Either they're in the middle of the desk or like you pop them over on the right-hand bank of faders on the right side of the desk. And I think that's where I really kind of learned and got comfortable using my left hand to ride like solo instrument faders, and then my right hand riding effects. And that's kind of stayed with me. But yeah.
Cool. I know we had a question a while back, and I saw you address it on Facebook, but it was about bus mixing and how everybody has like a bus for each instrument group, like drum bus,
Oh yeah,
guitar
I'll
bus,
go back to that.
bass key bus, and then you had mentioned like you really didn't do a lot of that, and if you did, it was very minimal.
Exactly.
So
yeah, these are my buses: drums, bass, keys, horns, tracks, guitar, vocals, and I honestly don't even need. Well, I have guitar separate because guitar is Cory's lead instrument, so it's like another vocal bus essentially, but it's his guitar. How do I see what processing I'm doing on this?
Yeah, open that screen right there.
All right, and then we've got. Oh yeah, no processing. I think I have a compressor. There we go.
Yeah.
So I have a limiter on this, and this is like my second stage of compression. So on the individual drum tracks, I've got compression on every channel and gates. And then one thing I like to do, and this is carried over from studio stuff, is I like to limit my drum bus so I don't have any stray peaks. And it's not really compressing at all. Like this is literally just to catch stray peaks. So most of the time it's doing like 0.5 to 1 dB of compression. So it's not affecting the feel of the kick or the snare. It's not like pumping or anything like that. But if there's a snare hit that kind of sneaks through, then it's going to catch that and it's not going to be outrageously loud. But I also just like my kick and snare to be kind of poppy and like feel like they're in the same pocket. So this is one way to kind of, with a compressor or limiter meter, just get that to happen. Let me see what I'm doing on. Bass. I have a dynade on here, and it's triggered from the kick. Where do I see that? Oh my gosh, it's been too long. How do we get to the dynade on this?
Go to insert A.
There it is. All right. Yeah, so this is sidechained from the kick, just this dynamic EQ band. External sidechain. Drew's going to be way better at this than I am because I'm like, I don't remember how to use this console. It's just been 2 months.
We all haven't touched our stuff in so long. Like I had to break out some wireless stuff the other day for a webinar, and I was like, I don't even remember how to use any of this.
Yeah. I'm literally my laptop is sitting on top of our stage rack for Cory right now. So I've got the gear in front of me, but it's the first time I've taken it out since the apocalypse. Let's see. So that's what I'm doing on the bass. Literally nothing else. And these guys, I'm probably not doing anything on these buses. What is that?
Chorus? That's a chorus effect.
That's bypass though. I tried it. I didn't like it.
That was probably experimental. That was the experimental.
Experimental. Let's see. EQ, compression, nothing. Yeah, it's out. All right. So there you go. I generally don't like having anything on my master or on my buses. Like that's the ultimate answer to that. I like to compress and EQ on individual channels, and that's just a personal thing. I think some people do really have really good mixes when they do processing on the buses, and they leave a lot of individual channels alone. It's just like they could probably get a mix together that sounds exactly like mine. And you wouldn't know until you looked at the file. But my main reason for processing everything individually is because I want to be able to have every single instrument in the show be a solo instrument, like, and sound good on its own, with as much compression as needed, like without slamming the bus. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want it to be loud to have the right tone of compression. Which is why I like to just compress on individual channels rather than the bus. I'll pause this sharing. There we go. Yeah. So hopefully that's helpful. it's just my way of doing it. Obviously, there's a bunch of different ways to do that and get the same kind of sounding mix, but that's my approach.
That's the beauty of most digital modern consoles is you can kind of make it anything you want to make it.
Yep.
You know, you can make it your workflow, you can make it someone else's workflow. But you know, regarding DLive, I mean, you could put anything you want anywhere. So it really, you know, like we'll get into it in a minute, but we were talking about how he sets up the in-ear monitor mix with an IP6 controller. You can put anything anywhere. And it's incredible. So we hit bus mixing, but and I was going to say, what features or functionality is crucial to you in getting a front of house mix? I know you kind of touched on it, and there were some questions in the chat, and I saw on your screen share you had a matrix set up for Smart, and someone was asking, like, you know, do you tune rooms? How'd you learn how to tune a room? Like tuning a PA. So like, you know, obviously having, you know, Smart, a matrix in the console, that's a tool that you probably use. What are some other tools you use, like when you go to a new venue and you set up the room and you kind of get everything up and going?
Man, Smart, and this is my advice to everybody, learning how to tune a PA is single-handedly the most valuable skill you can master as a front of house engineer. And I haven't been fortunate enough to tour on a crew where I have my own system tech. So I've always had to do my own tuning. And I've never carried PA. If I toured and we carried the PA, then we would have had a system tech do that that I would have worked with. But most times I'm doing tours or one-offs and we're using in-house PA, or it's being brought in just for that show. And so it's a different PA every day. And there's always a system tech from whatever company is providing the gear. But their flavor of tuning is never going to be the same as what I want to hear in my head. So that's something that you got to figure out how to communicate to your system tech for the day. And also figure out how to do it yourself so you know what you want, how to communicate that. I personally, like, I know a lot of better engineers than me carry like a Lake processor and other stuff and kind of some outboard gear to help with the tuning and with their stereo bus. I have never done that, and it's just honestly because I want to keep things simple, and I want to be able to fly on a plane with a USB drive and get where I'm going and plug in the USB and have all my tools there. And so I like to do all of my PA tuning, at least personal, like touch sweetening, in the matrices. So I send my mix to the left-right bus, and I leave the left-right bus completely alone. I leave it clean, like no EQ, no compression. And from there, I create zones. So I'll send my left-right to, 8 matrices. So there's my left-right matrix for front of house, the PA, and there's a front fill matrix, and then there's a delay matrix, and then a sub mix, which doesn't come from my left-right. It comes from a separate aux usually. Yeah, and then a separate broadcast feed. So I would take my left-right and then blend it with audience mics for a broadcast mix. But that's a really good thing to keep in mind if you're using headphones, because when you plug in your headphones, the default setting is to be monitoring your left-right mix. So if you have any EQ on your left-right mix for the PA, it's also coloring your headphones. And you don't want that. You want your headphones to be clean, exactly what the console is producing. And then you want your PA EQ to happen after what you're monitoring. So that, I mean, honestly, I could talk a while about PA tuning, but I will say, honestly, any console that's given to me, as long as I have the ability to tune a PA with it, that's probably the most valuable tool. And then the 2 other tools are multiband compression on the vocals, and the ability to create a custom fader layer. So I'm comfortable, like routing faders during the show.
Yeah, that's true. Let's go ahead and take a question from the chat. There's been a few to scroll through here. Let's see here. I'm just gonna pick one at random here. What was your favorite venue to mix in with Ben Rector? And then also, what was your least favorite venue to mix with Ben Rector?
Oh man. Well, my favorite venue with Ben, man, I think Ascend Amphitheater might have been one of my favorite venues, just because it's Nashville, it's hometown show. That was a few years ago. It's kind of stressful because it's like, when you're in your hometown, everyone you
Everyone's
know is
there,
there
yeah.
judging your mix. But we had a DMB PA, sounded amazing. I love DMB PAs. I'm a big fan of those. I really like L Acoustics. They're new PAs. And again, I haven't even said this, but I'm not a gear snob when it comes to speakers. We've never carried speakers.
You just want it to sound good.
I just want it to sound good. Yeah. So I don't know all the specific model names, but whatever the newest L Acoustic stuff is, I think sounds incredible. And the newest DMB, the J's, for DMB sound really good. And I mean, that kind of, Ascend was a vibe and big outdoor show. I love outdoor shows.
That is a really cool venue.
Yeah. Everything, when it's outdoors, it's so clean. You don't have to worry about reflections. And whenever I get to hear my mix like dry, like exactly as I intended it, it sounds exactly the same on headphones. When you're outside and there's no reflections and it's just huge and massive. It's very satisfying as a front of house guy.
Yeah, true.
That was my
least favorite.
Least favorite. Well, there's this this was like on the same tour. Might have been even the most recent tour. I don't remember. There's this venue in Detroit, and I'm not going to say the name of the venue. I don't even remember it. But it was significantly smaller, and the production manager just showed up and left after 15 minutes after telling me we couldn't do any of the things that we needed to do, like couldn't hang anything. And the ceiling's also was 9 feet tall or something above the stage, and there was nothing to hang from. We ended up stacking speakers and then putting lights on top of the stack of speakers. It felt like I was in middle school putting on a concert with my uncle's makeshift PA, which is just hilarious after doing this run of massive shows. That was my least favorite. I mean, and honestly, whether or not the gear was nice or whatever, what made it not a fun show was just the fact that the people, the production manager, was just so weird. He just left, and didn't that was it. He left after 15 minutes and never came back. And it was cool. A very strange show. Yeah, very cool.
Weird.
But I think that's most important to me. I mean, if people are easy to work with and they're kind, I always respond a lot better in that kind of situation. And I think honestly, the pro audio, live sound industry has gotten a lot better about that. When I started, I was a young kid. I didn't get any respect. I wasn't asking for respect. I just want to be treated like a human. But there were a lot of old guys that had been doing stuff for a while, and they were kind of gruff, and it was very intimidating, and it was not a very kind environment. And now I feel like everyone I meet, at least from, the venues that we're doing, which are mid-size or large venues, everyone I meet is really kind, easy to work with. There are a lot more women now than there were when I started, which is cool.
Awesome. Yeah. Super cool.
And that's something I hope we see a lot more of. That was a really roundabout answer to that question, but covered a lot of stuff.
That's what we're here for. This is just happy hour. I know we're going to jump back real quick, but Jeff from Allen and Heath did ask about room tuning. On the flavor of room tuning, do you want a low mid into low frequency tilt boost?
Yes.
Or do you like to start out flat?
I want it to be warmer. So on Smart, I like my curve to be tipped a little bit. So if you play source, whatever reference material, music you listen to through the PA, I want it to sound flat but tipped, so there's a little more low end, and the top end is tapered a little bit. It's not like crazy bright. A lot of PAs naturally boost the top end. They have, whatever, 3K, 4K, 5K, or 10K and up. Sometimes it can be really harsh, really quick, and I always want to smooth that out as best I can, so that in my mix I can boost those frequencies to make things pop out and stick out of the mix without being afraid of them starting to sound harsh and gross.
Speaking of room tuning, though, what song
Yeah.
do you typically? Is it Donald Fagen?
Well, I don't choose my songs based on anything besides just what I like to listen to. Honestly, like, if anyone has had me come mix for them in the last 4 years, I think I've been using American by the 1975 as my first song,
It's a good mix.
which is, I love the 1975. And that has, I mean, it's not necessarily about anything particular of that song. It's a nice full spectrum mix. There's not too much low end or too much top end. It just sounds really good. The drums sound, I mean, they're kind of
Oh yeah, they cut. I mean,
they really
sound,
cut. Yeah,
they sound great.
some a lot of like gated reverb on them, but it's not what my mix sounds like live. I just start with that because I like it and I know how it sounds. That Betty Who, there are a couple Betty Who songs. High Society. There's a Paper Route song called You and I that I use a lot, and I do use that for the kick and the snare. The kick in that song, and it honestly, when I've come back and listen to that in my studio, it sounds different than when I use it live to tune, because live you have like a massive subwoofer that you're trying to tame. But I use You and I when I'm dialing in the level of the subs relative to the level of the mains. So I play that song, and when the kick comes in, I just massage the mains and the sub level. And when I find that balance that I want, I leave it. And then from there, when I am mixing instruments and I'm sending a kick to the sub, I know it's going to be the right amount to still sound good in like the broadcast mix. There's one dangerous thing is if you have your subs too hot, if you have your subs too hot, you might have your kick really quiet in your mix, but it's sending to your sub, so you feel it and it's super loud in the room, but you listen back afterwards to the recording, which is just the left right, and your kick is non-existent and there's no top end
because there's no SPL in the headphones.
Yeah. But yeah, so room tuning, that's I like it warm because I like to have my mix a little brighter, and like choose things to pop out. And that I did see a question. Someone was asking how I like to get vocals and solos to pop out of the mix, and that's exactly how I do it. I like to have most instruments just dark or flat. I mean, I don't do a ton of EQ off the bat except on drums, when I'm sculpting drums, and that's taking out 400, 500, boost in the top, boost in the bottom a little bit. But guitars, bass, keys, I start with all of them flat. If I want something to cut in the mix, I'm just using my ear, and if I think it needs more presence, I will boost it, 3K, 5K, 8K. And generally speaking, with a darker PA, when I boost that one instrument, I'm able to boost it more, and it cuts through the mix when that frequency isn't as present in the other instruments. But beyond that, writing the faders is the way I make things cut. So if I want a guitar,
the most old school way. Yeah,
you push the fader up, 5 dB, and there's your solo. I do want, the audiences, whatever they're focused on should be the vocal or the lead, like the solo instrument, whatever's carrying the melody, that should be in the center. And with Cory and Vulfpeck, it's not vocals a lot of times, it's different instruments. And so like for me, I'm following along musically, and whatever I feel like is carrying the melody, I'm going to push a little bit. Or if I know from the recording of the song that this instrument is supposed to be carrying the melody, I'll push it a little bit.
But
One
I
other
guess
thing,
you wouldn't
yeah,
normally, you wouldn't like say you specifically carve out room, like in the band track to make room for a vocal, so to say, because I know some people do that, but I feel like it subtracts so much more when you do that,
I
than
don't
just riding a
intentionally do
fader.
that. I keep everything. I want every instrument to sound really good on its own, and I want it to have nice presence. Like every single instrument, I want to be. If you soloed it, if you pushed it up 3 dB, 4 dB, 5 dB in the mix, it should sound like a beautiful solo instrument with as much top end and as much bottom end as like feels right, as feels good. So every instrument is already EQ'd like that, and I'm not cutting it. I'm not taking away the presence of all those instruments. But when you have, I mean, it's just a level change. When you boost something 4 dB in level, it's going to sound louder and cut more than everything else.
Right.
But vocals particularly, I'll say I boost the top end of more. I mean, I think vocals are one thing you can get away with getting some air out of them without it sounding harsh. I'm really careful, 3K, 4K, 5K. I use 2K. I use the Dyne 8 and like the dynamic EQ to smooth those frequencies out. So I'm cutting usually at 2K or 4K. But I'm also boosting like a shelf 7K and up or 10K and up, a few dB, and boosting 5K depending on the singer. Some people already have a pretty bright voice, and like 5K, I kind of want to be present. I feel like it sounds really nice and sizzly. You get 5 or
Mhm.
6K active in the vocal, and then above that you got the air, like the nice like
All the
really
sibilants.
clean sibilance, and it really helps with intelligibility. But I mean, most other instruments aren't going to have information up there. Guitars, above 4K, there's not much happening there usually. Keys, there's not much happening above 4K. Drums, like kick and snare, like you've got information up there, but it's transient and it's immediate and it goes away. It's not clouding up the mix. So drums have, I let them have some nice top end presence so they cut through the mix. But yeah, beyond that, it's just vocals. I mean, synths, and that synths can have a lot of top end. So if a keyboard player has a patch that's really bright, I'll use a low pass filter that out a little bit, like to 10K or 12 or something, and soften the top end so that the vocal is able to sparkle on its own.
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's hop over to Reddit real quick.
Okay.
This was a good question, and it was saying, Vulfpeck really didn't bring their own engineer or any crew at all much later than many other bands do, which I always thought was an odd choice because of their music seems to beg for a nuanced treatment. So, I guess, do you have any insight on why and what made them change their mind and how long you've been with them?
Yeah. I've been with Vulfpeck for I don't know how long actually. 3 years, 2.5, 3 years, something like that. I just got lucky that they decided to start bringing a front of house guy. And I was the guy that Cory happened to recommend.
Which, by the way, Cory is in the chat, and he said that he has action up to 12K, and then he emoji dabbed.
Yes. Cory's guitar is a lead instrument. He's got stuff happening up there. That's a lead vocal for me. But yeah, Vulfpeck, they're just super DIY, which you gotta respect, more so than any other artist I've ever worked for. Like just super DIY, super simple. Like everything is as clean and simple, and efficient as it possibly can be. And yeah, when I do know, like when they started playing some bigger shows, like there's some growing pains there when you don't have your own engineer. So
Yeah,
I
because
think
how many inputs are they?
they're not that many. I mean, it's only like 25 or 30 actual musical inputs.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Because sometimes you'll see artists that'll be like 2 or 3 people, and they're like, "Yeah, we're 54 tracks," and you're like, "What?"
Yeah.
But I guess like you said, if it's truly DIY and it's all real instruments, then channel countdown goes tremendously.
Yeah, I mean it's simple. But I think the main reason they brought me on was because they wanted some consistency, and the thing that blew their mind at first was like, oh my gosh, we don't have to sound check for an hour and a half just to get things usable. When someone knows what the band wants their monitors to sound like, then they can just show up. And that's how I started running things. And I did the first year and a half by myself, like with no monitor guy. I did monitors from front of house for Vulfpeck with wedges. And so we had 8 wedge mixes, and I would just show up and I would use virtual sound check and play the previous show or a show that I liked that was from a similar room, and go up on the wedges and like get everything dialed in that way. And then when they showed up, everything was set up. I just unmuted everything, and then we could have played a show, then. But yeah, I think that's the answer to that question.
So
They're super cool to work with. I mean, they have the lowest expectations, and the smallest egos of anybody I've ever worked with, which makes you feel so good because everything you do, they're grateful for. And
it's hard to find these days, man.
Yeah,
It really is.
yeah.
That's awesome.
So yeah, and that's honestly, I'm a people pleaser, and when I get positive feedback and positive reinforcement, I do a better job. And that's like one place. I mean, live sound in general, I've always felt like I got really good positive feedback, and that's one thing I kind of thrive off of. I probably mental health wise, I probably need to get better about being secure in my own skills without the feedback from others. But
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't worry about that being insecure as much as like I know that you're a perfectionist and you strive for everything to be as great as it can. And I do the same thing. Like when we were setting up this stream, I was like, "There's no way I'm using my MacBook camera and my built-in MacBook." Like, it's like we gotta sound good. So like I wouldn't say that's an insecurity at all. I would just say you're always trying to give it better, and that's also hard to find. So kudos.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Major kudos. Now regarding them, what would you say the most challenging thing about mixing them? And I keep seeing a lot of questions about the Madison Square Garden show, and
We'll
promise
talk about it.
We'll talk about it. That'll be the encore. So
well, maybe we should hit it right now. I don't know. Encore? Okay, encore.
Yeah, we'll wait.
Keep
we'll
people
wait.
around.
Yeah, you guys gotta wait.
You gotta wait through the actual technical like learning, and then we'll talk about the gossip at the end.
It's a really juicy story. I can't wait for y'all to hear it. But no, so what would you say the most challenging thing about mixing them as a whole is?
So I don't think they're that challenging to mix because I'm a musical person and I enjoy just listening and following along to what's going on. To someone who doesn't have a background in music, it might be more difficult to be able to tell like, okay, this is the melody that's happening right now, and I need to push that a little bit. The most challenging thing, technically speaking, is probably everybody changing instruments, and this is hard from a front of house perspective and monitors. So we've got Austin Brucker, my buddy who does monitors, and we went to in-ears just last year. And so he's got 10 in-ear mixes, and we still have the wedges up there just as like a safety measure. So he's got like 8 wedge mixes, 10 stereo in-ear mixes, and everyone changing instruments, song to song. So there's like I don't know, like 50 configurations for a single show.
Yeah.
And people just jump around, and there's no one set list. And there's no one arrangement of any song, even though there is consistency show to show. But gosh, man, I don't even know how he does that, because it's too chaotic to use snapshots. I mean, I think he's just riding the faders. I'd have to ask him. But at front of house, the main thing that's tough is like with the keys, like the B3 and the Rhodes, and the clav. I just compress the heck out of the clav. I have a heavy gate on it because a lot of those old instruments have kind of a hum, and heavy gate and a heavy compressor. And so like when Jack's slamming on the clav, it's like hitting -16 or something crazy on the compressor.
Yeah.
But then like when Theo's playing that or Woody's playing it, it's not compressing at all.
Yeah. Because everyone's got different hands. I mean, like even
yeah.
because I'm a drummer, and sometimes I have to have like like my bass player, like I'm like hit the kick, and he's like doom. I'm like, no, hit it like hit it like you mean it, hit it like it owes you money. And even then, still like I sit behind the board and I look over and it's just like clipping. But so it's like I know every time people change instruments, it always changes.
Yeah. Luckily, Jack and Theo, who both play drums, play with similar intensity. And so it feels, honestly, like I always think it feels very similar when they play. So I don't do any tweaking of the instruments when people change. I'm riding the faders and maybe tweaking the compressor. But everything I do with them is on the fly. I don't use snapshots because it keeps me a little more engaged with what's happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I know right before we went live, we were talking about sandbagging at soundcheck, and that's what Cory just said. And it was just like everyone does it. Yeah, no matter who you are, you'll be like, all right, give me some level, and I'm like, give me your loudest level, and they do, and it's never like as soon as they, it's your adrenaline, it's everything. You get up on stage, and all of a sudden, you're louder than you've ever been at every sound check ever.
Yeah.
So I always try to compensate for that when doing a mix.
Yeah.
So that's cool. We did have a lot of questions about just the drum and bass tones with them.
Yeah.
How do you approach the drum? Like EQing the drums. I know we've kind of talked about the drum bus and everything. We use EQ and comp on the individual channels, but anything special you do, or any kind of special plugins or EQ that you do that's you consider maybe less normal?
Man, well, for bass, Joe's going like direct into a radial JDI. I think that, I mean, he might have changed to something else recently, but for a while we just used a JDI, and he has his own. And then from there, just right into the console, and then it sounds really good, just flat. And it's just the way he plays. I mean, it's that and the tone coming out of his bass.
So was the DI in between the bass and the amp, or was it like out of the
so he doesn't use any, at least I don't think he has any pedals. He just has a tuner, and then the tuner goes straight into the DI. And the DI loops out to the amp.
Yeah, you can't get much simpler than that.
No, man, it's super simple. I am boosting 700, I'm boosting 1K, and I'm boosting like 3K on his bass. I mean, I think I'm trying to picture it in my head. And if you've seen, I probably posted a video where like you could see the bass EQ in the video, but it's pretty much just I'm boosting that mid-range so it pops out. He has a great tone where there's like, it's very even, and there's plenty of low end and plenty of like intelligible mid-range happening. But I think that's the most important thing, just to have the mid-range be intelligible, because his instrument he's playing a solo half the time. So you have to be able to hear and understand what he's doing. I do have one thing I do that I wouldn't do with other bands is he occasionally slaps the bass. And so I have like a limiter with a really fast attack on there. And that's the only compressor I use at this point. It's pretty simple. Like I don't have another compressor and then the limiter. I just have the limiter, and when he's playing really hard, and there's a lot of attack, it's doing like 6 to 10 dB of compression. And when he's playing soft, there's like 1 dB of compression or no compression. But yeah, I mean, there's no nothing else fancy, man. It's just the way he plays. As far as drums go, they're dry, completely dry, no reverb, and that's just a Vulfpeck thing, or funk music in general. Like a lot of times there's not a lot of reverb on stuff. For me, that was a big change from every other artist I toured with. We've got a big, plate on the snare and big concert hall or whatever. So for them, it's like no reverb on any primary instruments besides vocals. So the drums, I mean, I do what I do with other artists, and I just have it be really tight and punchy. My compressors are usually 4-1, an attack on the snare like 15 milliseconds, attack on the kick like 30 milliseconds.
What about
Release.
drum mics? I know that adds a ton, just depending on what you use. So what's your go-to?
Yeah, my go-to is a 91 on the kick in, 91, a beta 91. And I think the beta, that's a Shure beta 91A.
Yeah, it looks like
the bottom end on that
looks like this.
Yeah, that's it.
This one's, someone ripped the jack out of it, but it looks like that.
Oh, yeah. I carry that with me everywhere I go. So if I'm doing any show and I get there and on the rider, I have a 91 on the input list. But if you get there and they're like, oh, we don't have a 91, we just put up a 57, is that going to work? I'm like, no, I need the 91. So I get my 91 out of my backpack. And I use that. That's honestly the only mic that I can't like live without. Because the kick is like the anchor to your mix, and the way I tune the PA and the subs, like if the kick is translating differently, it's going to throw my ear off. I'm not going to know, like, is that the kick? Is that the drum, or is it the PA or the room?
Right.
With the 91, it sounds very similar no matter what kick drum you use. I don't know how else to explain that. I feel like other mics, like a 52, is going to change. The sound changes dramatically based on whatever kind of drum it is and the depth of the drum and the placement. Whereas a 91, you kind of only have a few options inside the kick of where to put it and angle
Plus,
it.
Plus, it's a half cardioid mic. So it's not exactly like it's, like a full cardioid or super cardioid. So it's going to have a very similar pickup pattern, especially if you put it in the same spot inside of a drum every single time.
Yeah.
You're going to get consistent results.
Yeah. I love the top end on that. Like the slap is so great. And you could do anything you want with it. So for Vulfpeck, they don't like a ton of brightness on instruments. And so I have a low pass filter. And again, this changes day to day, but I'm just like, probably it's at 10K or something, where there's nothing above 10K coming through on that. Snare, SM57 on the top and the bottom, nothing fancy. There's kind of a lot of compression on the Vulfpeck snare, and the way Theo and Jack play, and they use the big fat, I think that's what it is.
Big fat snare drum.
They use a pad. Yeah. And it's like fabric.
Gives it like a instead of a snappy snare sound.
Yeah. I know there are several brands, so I don't want to say that's the one, but I do know they use a ring. It's a full pad. It's probably a big fat snare drum pad, but that's integral to that sound. And we put a towel on the floor tom, like a stage towel.
Yep. Get that 70s vibe.
That's it. Yep.
Yeah, I dig it. All right, let's take a couple questions. There's been a bunch.
Okay.
Coming in. My first one the mouse lands on is, what's the story behind, we're jumping from artist to artist here. What's the story behind Ben Rector MLPS? I'm not sure what that means.
Oh, Minneapolis.
Okay. Yeah, sure. Magic. How was that born?
That, I think Ben just wanted to have some fun with, like tracking live. And that was done with John Fields up in Minneapolis. And John Fields is an awesome engineer and mixer. I think he did everything on that, like tracked it, recorded it, mixed it. I was there to do video stuff. So I filmed the video for that. I'm doing the Steadicam iPhone video, but I didn't have anything to do with it other than that. But yeah, I think Ben just wanted to have fun. playing with some of the guys in the band that and that didn't do the last tour, like they weren't available for the last tour we did. So it was kind of fun to do right before the tour with a different band. But yeah, it's just if you haven't heard that, it's just 4 arrangements of songs from his album Magic, and it's like kind of funky Minneapolis vibe versions of them.
Speaking of Magic, did you mix the live album that's out now
I did.
in the studio?
I mixed the live album. Yep.
So if y'all haven't heard that, as soon as we're done here, go on whatever music consumption service you use and just look up Ben Rector Magic Live. I remember when it came out, I had to like pull over and I was texting Jake. I was like, dude, I don't know what you've done, but this is one of the most incredible live sound mixes I've ever heard. Truly. And I backed that up when I was at Infocom and I walked by the Danley booth, like the Danley demo room, which is a very, high-end, high-power speaker company, and they're really known for demoing it with like incredible mixes. And I walked by and Jake's mix was playing. So I was like, dude, you're literally at the Infocom booth just getting people's heads ripped off with this mix.
That is
but
hilarious.
it really sounds good. So if y'all haven't, yeah, I mean, someone said Loving You is easy, dude. The whole entire, like the drums, the vocals, like that's why I was like, what kind of vocal mic do you use? And you were like, it's just a Beta 58Y. And I was like, dude, it's the best sounding Beta 58 I've ever heard in my life.
Yep.
So if you haven't checked it out, definitely check it out.
Well, lower your expectations a little bit before you listen to it. But yeah, definitely listen to it.
It sounds great.
Yeah.
Cool.
Oh, by the way, vocals. I mean, yeah, every artist I work with, I want to use an SM58 on their vocal because it's consistent and this is not an SM58. I was going to say, yeah, like this, but
neither is this.
the
Okay.
easiest mic to find. Every venue has SM58s. And I feel like the body of a voice comes through the most, like it's like the most true, I guess, to an actual voice you're listening to like live in person. And the top end, I can always get what I want out of it. But yeah, so that's
plus when you spec a 58 and you go across the country, it's going to sound exactly the same if you spec'd it in, Norway if you did when you did in San Diego.
Yeah,
it's just it's this like is it the best sounding microphone in the world? That's up for debate. But is it the most consistent? Probably, which is why everybody uses it.
Very consistent, and it's very good with plosives. Like you don't have many plosives with, even when you're eating the mic, the whatever the capsule like doesn't pick up plosives the way a lot of other like hi-fi mics do. That are boosting different frequencies.
Right.
Yeah. What else we got?
Let's see. Virtual sound checks.
Yes.
Do you use them, and how do you use them?
Yes. I use them a lot, and this I touched on earlier. I used them for Vulfpeck for a lot because I would get there several hours before the band. And I mean, I'm like for them, like at this point, it's me and the monitor guy. So we're a 2-man show. I mean, it's comical how low, like it's just us two. And that's how we did MSG, which was probably like a bad idea. I wouldn't recommend doing it with like no crew at all, but that was a stretch. We're adding crew now after that.
There you go. Redundancy, right?
Yeah. But virtual soundcheck is amazing because you don't have to have your band on stage like getting worn out or dicking around just playing random stuff. Like with virtual soundcheck, it's actually the level they played at the last show, which is important if you're actually making mix changes. So I'll use it. I'll use it to tune. Like, so my tuning process is I will walk in, pink noise, all the zones, make sure I actually have the zones working. And then I'll play, like that 1975 song, a couple other songs, see how it sounds. And then I'll use Smart and with pink noise, get a clean, flat response. Then I'll play the music again, listen for a minute or something, make final tweaks, and then I'll play the show back through the console with virtual soundcheck and actually like pretend I'm mixing the actual show. So that's how it's going to sound when the crowd is there at, you know, at nights. The levels are the same. I get my master level set. So like, this is the show. The only change really is the people in the room. So I know the room's going to change. But when you have really consistent players, I know that input level is going to be very, very close to like to that.
Right.
And that's more valuable than the band actually coming on stage and sound checking a lot of times, because when they do that, they're going to play a little quieter, and it's not a true representation of what it's going to sound like at the show.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's how I use it. And I also would use it like on Ben's tour. We had I'd have downtime between, you know, setup and sound check and then sound check and the show. And so if I needed to tweak something, man, I could just mute the PA, put headphones on, play virtual sound check, and just like practice mixing the show or make tweaks on snapshots, dial in gates like to get them perfect so they open up at just the right threshold.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of stuff. And I use virtual sound check when I'm in the shop. So like pre-production, I will make sure I record one of the rehearsals, or honestly, we record every rehearsal. But I'll go in and record the band before we are in production rehearsals, and I'll try to get that like with the equipment. So I'll rent the console to get the new arrangements at volume, like with the preamp set correctly,
Right.
and get that virtual sound check in my computer so I can go to the shop and then program snapshots for the whole show. So we get to production rehearsals and I'm not wasting time like creating stuff. I'm just running through and like tweaking things.
Yeah, that's the best way to do it.
Yep.
Let's see if there were any other questions we missed from the chat. Where are we at here? Answered that one. Let's see. Cory's been answering a lot of questions. Thanks, dog.
Oh, answering them? Nice. Yeah, anyone has more questions, just
direct them at
look in the chat. Look for Cory's.
They're hanging in the chat. Speaking of Cory though, oh, here we go. Simple question: how do you approach gain structure? That's a great question, because it's one of the most often overlooked things in all of AV. When someone says, "Oh, it doesn't sound good," be like, "Well, what's your gain structure?" Be like, "What's that?" So, how do you go about your gain structure?
I just like to have a healthy input on the preamp, and I believe this is in line with most other engineers that I look up to. I just like it to be. I mean, if we're saying there's so many different types of dB levels, you know, so we'll say dB full scale, right? If you're on a digital console and you're going to clip if you hit 0, right? So when you got minus 10 or something, you've got 10 dB of headroom before you clip. I like my preamps to be like 70 or 80% full, right? So green hitting yellow, which on most consoles is like -6 or -9, something like that.
Which like isn't it like analog 0 is like -6 dBFS?
I actually don't know. I really should know stuff like that, but
if anyone knows, type it in the chat.
Yeah. Yeah, I like to use peak meters. I just have, because I've used so much digital equipment, I'm used to seeing peak meters more than RMS meters. So I will change the metering to peak if it's RMS in software. But I just like the peaks when they're really loud to be like -3 max, and then the level lives at like -12 or -10 or 9 or something like that. Anyways, that's the most important thing. After that, when you get the preamp set, like it almost doesn't matter what you do. But that's the most important thing, because that's your level that you can't fix. Everything else in the console, like digital trim and your EQ and what you're doing on the compressor and boosting, like I would use that to just get your faders where you want them to be. But I would always have a healthy level on the preamp. And then if you really want your fader at 0, like all your faders at 0, I would still get a healthy level in the preamp and then find somewhere else in the signal chain to digitally trim it down. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like
Yeah.
a lot of consoles have a trim before the EQ. And so I get a healthy preamp level and then just put my fader at 0 and trim the EQ, put the trim down to like -10 or -12, wherever you feel comfortable with the fader. So a lot of people like to have the fader at 0 because you have the most play.
Right.
You
Yeah.
drop below -10 and all of a sudden, with the logarithmic scale, you have less room to move before it jumps in level. So I like to have my faders at like -5, and then a solo is 0, and then a louder solo is +5. So like I'm moving between -5 and +5. That's how I do it, but I do it with digital trim.
Yeah.
I always have
like
a
that.
healthy level in the preamp.
I like that. There was another question from Reddit that was directed about Cory Wong and when you tour, about monitor guys. Do you guys travel with a monitor guy? And I know before we went live, we talked about how you use the IP6.
Yeah.
For
So
his
we
mix.
don't have a monitor guy with Cory, but what do I have here but an IP6?
Bum, bum, bum.
And this is actually plugged into our D-Live rack, our stage rack. So this is like actually changing things. And I have to remember not to save this. Well, let's see if I can show you what's going on. So this is we only have one on stage, and this is basically Cory's monitor console.
Yeah, and basically, if
Cory doesn't tweak his own mix, he tweaks the mix for everyone else in the band. With this, the first day we introduced it, I mean, it was like Cory was the monitor guy, and everyone was just complaining to him, and it was hilarious.
Yeah, because what's different about this versus this is not a personal monitor mixer at all. This is a control surface.
Yep.
That is masquerading as a personal monitor controller.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to be a personal monitor controller. It's every single button on here is like programmable, and you can control scenes with it. And what I've done, which is ludicrous, is this is controlling. It's 12 different scenes. So I made a scene for each person in the band, plus a couple extra. So basically, I have it set up just like a normal monitor controller. And keep in mind, you do have to program every single button and to do things. So I have this set up. So I've got pages, and these are just the different instruments. On the final page, I have like a more me kind of situation. So like there you can see whose mix it is. And then I've got his 2 vocal mics, his guitar, and then drums. That's just like a DCA that I assigned that only controls his in-ear mix. It's an addition, like it's a separate DCA. It doesn't affect my front of house mix. Because we're using the same one engine to run everything. I have all of the inputs duplicated. So there are 128 channels on the D-Live. And so I have like 1 through 64 is front of house, 65 through 128 is monitors, basically. But yeah, so he can control that. And I have it set up so this is level for his in-ears, like the send level. I don't know if you could see that very well.
Yeah, we can see it.
And then if you push and turn, it's the pan. And then I think this is actually pre-fader listen. So Cory in his own in-ear mix can solo stuff, and it will solo it in his in-ear, so he can find a buzz or something himself if he wants to. And then this is a send on and off. So these function like mutes, but only for this whatever mix that it's on. So it's like just controlling the send on and off for Cory's mix. And then on this page, I've got all the scenes, and I don't have them labeled physically, but like if I press that, you could see that it change over there.
Different
guitars mix, right? And then press that, it changes to is that KMAC bass, and yeah, so that's actually recalling a separate scene on the console that changes every single one of these buttons. So the channels are mostly the same, but I've gone in and changed which send bus is being controlled by the send on and off, and which send bus is controlled by the level and pan. And yeah, I mean, I feel like this is a pretty complicated way to use this, but it's essentially, we've built a monitor console with
That's
it.
cool.
And we only use it during sound check, really. So when Cory's up there and he's making tweaks for people, they don't have to bother me, and I can focus on front of house.
True.
Yeah, but
I mean, like it when people turn those things into like little baby rocket ships, because typically when we're demoing them, we just have like a demo file set up, and we're like, yeah, I can do all this, and then when you see someone like you, and I know Drew uses the IP8, which is the bigger one that has motorized faders.
Yeah,
I mean, that's a 64 fader control surface, if you think about it, and it's only got 8 faders, and so like it's just really cool to see what people can craft these things into, since you program into it.
I mean, it's crazy that you can get really, really creative with it. And I mean, a lot of console systems let you do things like that. The D-Live is interesting in that it's a network controller, so like if you have a Switch, you can have like a million of these or something. It's the possibilities are kind of endless, and that's just one piece. You know this, Kevin, but I don't know, people listening might not know that that's just like one modular device that works that way. But like there's a ton of different things we could be using to do a similar thing.
Yeah. I know that there's going to be one that Drew Thornton's doing. He's down here in the comments.
Yeah.
Shout out Drew. He's going to be doing one with kind of how he sets up his C1500 and everything like that. So stay tuned. I'm sure you'll see something from Alan and Heath, and stay tuned to his social. So he'll be doing one. Yeah. And then we got another one coming up with Chris Miller from Neck Deep and Don Broco State Champs. So we're going to be doing a lot of these in the meantime, and just find a way to pass the time. So stay tuned to the socials.
Yeah.
So let's flip it to a fun question.
All right.
What's the most fun or unexpected thing you had happen on tour?
Oh, this is tough. And I knew you were going to ask this, but I don't really have a good answer. I thought about it and I'm like, I don't know. I'm such a perfectionist that I spend most of my time just like trying to make things really good, and I don't spend enough time enjoying them. It seems like a cop out, but playing Madison Square Garden is like the coolest thing I think I've ever gotten to do with Vulfpeck. And so that was just a surreal experience. Definitely fun. I mean, that they could have had anybody do that, and I'm just lucky they brought me along for the ride.
That is cool. I know I was going to ask you that. I know that I had a thought, like when I was thinking about this question to ask you, I didn't know if this would be one of them, but a few years ago, I woke up like 3:00 in the morning, and I had a text from Jake, and it was a picture of a PSM 1000 body pack sitting in a red Solo cup full of rice.
Oh, yes.
And it said Ben.
Yes.
And I was like, oh God, what happened? And he goes,
that was good.
Was it like he was crowd surfing or something? And
no, better. There was a point in the show where he would go out in the audience and serenade people during I don't remember which song, one of the ballads. And as a joke, he would sometimes like sit in a guy's lap and serenade them instead of a woman's lap. I'm sure he was afraid to sit in a woman's lap, and that would have been inappropriate. It's still inappropriate to sit in anybody's lap,
especially today.
Yes, but it played well, and I don't think anyone felt super uncomfortable. This guy happened to have a beer sitting in his cup holder on his seat. So when Ben sat down, like on his armrest, his pack slipped right off his belt. It caught inside the lip of the full cup of beer and just dropped right in. And it just came right off, and his ears pulled out of it. Actually, you know what? I think his ears were still connected.
Yeah, because you said it would work for like a minute.
Worked.
And then he had like it worked for like a minute, and it had like alien noises.
Yeah. And none of us knew that was happening. So Ben was in his own little world, like with
That's
no
so
in-ears. But then our tour manager, Jordan Powell, grabbed a spare and ran. He was in the balcony when this happened, by the way. So it's like not nearby any of us. Jordan usually goes with him to help wrangle people, but he brought him a spare, and like we had the spare, working in less than a minute or something. But yeah, that was pretty hilarious, and it still worked. It still works. Like we just dried it out, and
Yep.
seems to be fine.
Yep. Sat in a cup of Coors Light, not a sponsor, but could have been any beer. That is funny. So Drew did ask a question. He said, "What's your favorite deep effects / effects in the D Live?"
Oh, Drew, I'm bad, man. I haven't gotten really deep in it yet. I think I really like the verb. Oh, you know what? Here's something I use, and this is somewhat interesting. Let me share the screen again. Drew, you got to tell me what your favorite effect is, and I'll try it. What have I got going on? The delay on my horns, where horn verb, is this it? Yeah, I think this is it. Yep. So one thing I really like about the D Live effects is you can have, you can blend in a slap with your verb. And so I have this verb, but it also has a slap delay inside it. And oh man, I don't even know how to get to that page.
I know like when
I'm not on the console.
Yeah, when you're so used to using the control surface and you go to the console, it always takes me a minute to be like, where is it? And then you're like, oh, it's right there.
Yep.
But sometimes I can't.
Anyways, I love the way the verb sound. Where's my vocal verb? The EMT250 on every single effect. It just sounds really good, dude. And this is like what amazing room live drums, plate snare, EMT250. Yeah, man, that EMT250 just sounds so good, like default settings. And I'm not a fancy, what am I doing here? Stereo, that's my tap stereo delay for vocals. Am I even using that? Probably not. Maybe. But yeah, that's my answer. 250, EMT 250.
It's pretty much just a rack of EMT 250s.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of fancy stuff in there, but I haven't gotten into it. Honestly, like Cory's stuff, which is what that show file is. It's all like clean, dry music, and I can't do there's no need to do a lot of crazy stuff. All the sources already sound really good. The horns, like the slap and the verb fills it out really nice. So I have them just panned up the center, but I have the slap almost like 80% of like volume, maybe 85% volume. So it's like, and it's really quick. So it just fills out. It has this nice like feel to it without having to pan a trombone left and a trumpet right. And then in the venue, it'd be really unbalanced because they operate as a section, not as individual parts. True.
Good, yeah.
Yes.
Well, I feel like you just got the D Live not too long ago, and I feel like
some newer
to get it going, and then all this happened. It's like no one's using D Live anywhere, so might as well talk about it and dig into it. All right, let's see. Drew did say he likes the gated reverb and the Trans-X. I guess he's talking about the transient designer. Not transient designer. The whatever the non-transient designer name is.
Whatever.
Don't get mad, Jeff.
The generic version of that is.
Yeah. Those are a lot of fun. So let's see more questions. So in addition to live sound, you've also done a lot of studio work. What is? Oh, sorry, I was getting a phone call. What was your favorite project as of recently?
So Anthony Chula is a good friend of mine. He's a brand new artist. That's like his EP is just like pop stuff, and he's got a lot of new music that is really cool that we're going to start working on here soon. But man, I love pop stuff, and his project was fun to work on. There's an artist named Maggie Miles, that I'm mixing her album, and we're just finishing it up now. She's released a couple songs from it. I didn't mix the first one. I just have to be transparent about that. But I mixed like 8 of the songs on the rest of the album. And yeah, I think she's a really cool artist. She has a song called, well, no, I shouldn't pronounce that. Then I think the next song she's releasing as a single is my favorite on the album. And that's all I'll say. I won't say the name of it, but she's super cool. I've liked working with her.
Well, cool. What was her name one more time? Maggie
Miles.
Cool. I'm gonna look her up.
Yep.
Follow her and see when it drops. All right, let's get through these and then we'll just kind of open up the chat. And then we'll get to the encore.
Yes.
What other engineers have inspired you to change the way you mix personally? Like, is there a show you've been to that you were like, oh my God, I got to figure out what they're doing? Or is it, just someone you follow?
Yeah, I think early on, the first part of my career, and I wish I knew his name. I don't know his name, but the front of house engineer for REO Speedwagon, it might have been Frank, but I don't know. I was so young. I wasn't in the habit of learning people's names. I just showed up and, mixed sound. But touring with Tyler Bryant, we did like an arena tour opening for REO Speedwagon and Pat Benatar.
Oh, that's sick. I didn't know that.
Yeah. That was my first year touring. So I was doing like these outdoor amphitheaters and arenas, and I had no idea what I was doing. But he let me use his console, and he helped me a lot. The best piece of advice he gave me was to record my mix and listen afterwards. So I would record the left, right, and listen on headphones after the show and hear all the terrible things I was doing. And it's probably his nice way of saying, you should really listen to what you
should probably practice
all this,
more practice.
What you're putting out. But that and using headphones. So in a venue that's really large, and if the front of house is like 75, 100 feet, 125 feet away from the PA, if you're in the way back of the floor, then you're hearing like the percentage of the room you're hearing gets greater and greater compared to the dry direct sound from the PA. And the way that I've learned to have a really good mix is to have whatever's coming out of the console sound really clean. And like the mix should sound exactly the way you want it coming out of the console before it goes anywhere else. So then when it goes it's distributed to different zones of PA, they're working with the highest quality mix you can present already. And at that point, it's just translating it to that area of the room, or that, portion of the PA. So as long as, and that's all you really can have control over as a front of house engineer. After that, it's like the system tech's job to make sure it translates well everywhere, which you should be aware of as an front of house guy. But the main thing you have control over is your console and what's coming out of it. But so checking stuff with headphones, having a consistent reference point is really helpful. It's like coming back to your own private studio every day. You know exactly how your speakers sound. And when you're touring, you're in a different room, different PA. I'm on a different PA every day. Everyone's in a different room every day. It's really good to have a consistent frame of reference. And so that's headphones and it's reference tracks. So like those songs I always play. I know how they're supposed to sound regardless of what environment I'm listening in. So I will say that. And then recently I saw Taylor Swift at Nissan Stadium on her last tour. And that was like my favorite front of house mix I've heard in a while. What's her front of house guy's name?
As soon as you said Taylor Swift's Nashville tour, his name came in my head and then went poof.
Okay.
Because I know he came to the AES console event. and we chatted there about some stuff, but I can't remember his
I
name.
feel like I should look him up. If
He's
you know
really
who
good. He's really good.
say it in the comments. But I found him on Instagram after that, and I think you or someone else put me in touch with him. I just said I really liked his mix, but it just sounded like better than the studio recordings, like, and that is so difficult to do with pop music. The drums sounded incredible. Her vocals sounded incredible.
Was his name David?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, yeah, that's right. David Payne.
David Payne. Yeah, I'm a big fan, David. And when you're done, I would love to have your job. So there's that. But no, David's young. He's not. I don't think he's gonna.
No, he's super young.
Yeah, he's older than me, but he's not gonna stop anytime soon. I'm jealous of that job. But with a lot of pop music, with tracks and especially vocal stacks, sometimes it's really difficult to blend a live vocal with stacks. And dude, it just sounded perfect. It sounded incredible. I don't know what black magic he's doing, but
And that was at Nissan Stadium, right?
at Nissan, yeah.
Yeah,
and I
which
wasn't
is
even
hard
that
to
close.
Yeah, but it's hard to sound good in any arena bowl.
Yeah.
So it's like, anytime you can sound good in an arena or the godforsaken Smoothie King Center in New Orleans, that room just is.
Yep.
Yeah, it's bad. Real bad.
The other mixer I'll say I'm a big fan of is he did Justin Bieber's last tour, did all the Linkin Park tours for forever. Oh my gosh, what's his name? I'm blanking now.
I don't know.
Someone knows what I'm talking about in the comments. You just say it. But I saw Justin Bieber at Bridgestone last year, and the band sounded incredible. I will say, like, his vocal mic, he at the end of the show he did like a waterfall thing, and I just have a feeling they didn't change the capsule out from like the last few shows.
Oh, and it got waterlogged?
Maybe they used the same mic for that. I don't know.
Someone said Ken Pooch.
Yeah,
Pooch Van Druten. Okay,
yep.
Yeah.
Ken Pooch Van Druten. But he's an incredible mixer. And I was on the floor for that, like right next to him, and it's just everything sounded incredible. So I'm a fan of his, and I've read some interviews he's given and podcasts he's been on. So he's a very good source of information if you want to become a better front of house guy.
Nice.
Yeah.
So this is the last scripted question that we've come across, but what advice would you give other engineers or young and inspiring engineers on how to get better, things they can practice, how to make the next step?
So whenever people reach out and they ask me this question, and the short answer is just start doing it. Like, practically speaking, that means finding a friend who's an artist or a musician that is going to play some shows, and ask them if you can come mix for them, like mix front of house for them. And that might be like doing a couple club shows a weekend at, in the next town over or the next state over, or just a short club run or something. And you'll either sink or swim. What will help you swim is if you are prepared. And so the second part of this advice is, read and learn everything you possibly can about mixing and live sound before you have to do it yourself. The only way to actually get better is by doing it, because you find out how your brain works when you're in a situation where time matters, and your workflow matters, and you're having to work with other people. There are people on stage, and you have to communicate with them while you are doing something else, with using your ears and problem solving and all of that. It's a really big exercise for your brain to wrap around all of the expectations you need to meet, and how you need to communicate with the venue staff and your artist when you're actually in a venue putting on a show.
Problem solving is a big one.
Yes.
Learning when something will go wrong. Let's just face it, right?
Yeah.
It'll
Every day you
it'll
got to
always go
problem
wrong.
solve.
You got to figure out how to fix it quick.
Yeah.
So doing research on that's a big one. I totally agree with that.
Yeah. And I mean, I love being over prepared for things. I always strive for excellence. I'm a perfectionist. And the way I achieve that in the real world is I just prepare as much as I possibly can. So like my show file, if I know what kind of console I'm going to be using, which at this point, I make sure I spec the console I want. So I know what I'm going to have, and I create the show file. If I don't already have one, I'll create it. I'll name everything. I'll dial in like my default starting settings for EQ and compression, organize everything, set up all my routing like buses, matrices, effects before I get to the venue. So when I turn on the console and load my file, all I have to do is actually make changes using my ears, because that's the only thing you can't do without virtual soundcheck in a band.
Right.
And it's hard to, you can't really do virtual soundcheck without the console there. So without being on a console, that's the only thing you can't do is use your ears. So everything I can do, everything that I could think of that I can do without using my ears, I do. And then when I get there, most of the problem solving revolves around actual mix things, like audio things that are, relatively fun to figure out. You don't want to problem solve how to plug in the keyboard to rename the channel. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, I'd rather spend my time figuring out how to get the top end right on the channel. So yeah, there's that.
Yeah, practice. And virtual sound check is a great way to practice. What a lot of people will do is they'll take their record multi-track from any console they're using, and you can dump that in your DAW and play with it until your heart's content. And learn new tricks, try new side chains, try something, and at that point, you're monitoring in your headphones. Take the practice, take it back to the console, see if it works. If it doesn't, great. It didn't work. Try something different. There's always endless things. I learn, like, every time I sit behind a console and I mix a band, I learn something new that I didn't know the day before. And it's either something I learned never not to do ever again, or it's something I should say, hey, I should put that in my starter show file. It's like something I'm always going to do. So I never stop experimenting. So that's just my 2 cents. But awesome. Well, thanks, Jake. That's all the questions I had. So I know we said we're turn it over to the chat. So let me scroll up here. Looks like someone did ask, will this stay up for those of us that missed the first part? Yes. This will remain on our YouTube channel indefinitely.
Cool. Sweet.
So
thanks
that'll
for
be
hanging
there
with us.
Yeah, guys. Thanks, everybody.
This is a nice long hang. I'm actually glad. I've never covered this much ground before talking with anybody. So it's nice that it's out there for a lot of people to be able to learn from.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to doing a lot more of these. I've done one with you, and then I'm doing one with Chris Miller, and then Drew's doing one with, I guess, just Jeff and Alan and Heath. But we'll make sure everyone stays up to date on when those are coming. And I'd love to turn this into just like a thing.
Yeah, this should be just a regular thing.
Every Thursday afternoon, we just kind of hang and talk audio. Maybe we can do it with more than 2 people. We can do it with 4 people. We can do whatever.
Yeah.
So let's see. Someone said, what world are you living in the studio? Pro Tools, Logic, Interface, and what are your favorite plugins?
Pro Tools all the way with Universal Audio. UAD. I have an Apollo, which you could see back here. It's an Apollo 16, and I've got an Octo card. So that's like 12 cores of UAD processing. Pro Tools and UAD stuff. That's my world for studio. I have Logic and I have Ableton, but I do not mix in either one of those. I have those so that I know how to use them. And I've used Ableton for a lot of live stuff, so like running tracks. Ableton is my favorite for that. And most bands I work with use Ableton.
Well, I know a lot of people use Logic. A lot of people use Logic for keyboards and MIDI arrangements. That's It seems like Pro Tools is like, your industry standard go-to. Logic is if you're working with a lot of MIDI instruments, and then like Ableton's if you're working with a lot of samples. And then
Yeah,
there's
that's a
like,
good way to put it.
yeah, and there's a slew of them out there. They all have their strong suits.
I like Pro Tools in that it's clean and it's technical. And I mean, it doesn't do anything for you. You have to create everything from scratch, which I like because I just know everything that's happening under the hood, so to speak. But yeah, that's in line with me. Just it's a little bit of a control freak thing, but it's also just understanding what's happening. When you level up as an engineer, like being able to understand everything that's happening behind the scenes is helpful. And some of the other softwares do a few things like automatically for you, and I'm sure you could turn it off, but I've been in Pro Tools so long, I'm probably not going to leave anytime soon.
I mean, it's kind of hard to get rid of it. It's been around for so long, and it's really become the industry hog. Technical question from Sir Cory Wong.
Oh yes.
How do you remove that little clicky noise when using a gate? I am running into that sometimes when mixing in the studio, but I hear it sometimes in live settings.
Oh, when using a gate. Oh, okay.
Talking about the click on the threshold.
Yeah, you just slow down the attack on the gate. So when the gate opens up, it opens up a little slower. That is usually what I do. So instead of having it open up with a 0 millisecond attack time, change it to
let it ramp up. Yeah.
3 milliseconds or 5 milliseconds, or maybe even longer. And depending on what kind of instrument it is, you may need a lot of that. Like if it's a snare, you don't want it to be super slow, but you're also not going to hear a click with a snare drum, or you might not even gate a snare drum, but like a kick. You might want some of the slap still, obviously, but you don't want to click in front of it. So yeah, 3 to 5, 10 milliseconds. That is how. That's how you clean that up.
Cool.
Or one way to clean it up. Yeah.
Yeah. There's probably more than one way to skin that cat.
I don't know. Actually, that might be the only way.
Yeah, you're probably right. Let's see. What is your approach to processing and mixing backing tracks with a live band?
Live. Yeah. I just want them to sound like they're being played on stage. I don't love it when backing tracks are like overly bright and processed, and it just depends on the mixing engineer how you get them. Some guys that use a lot of bus compression, when they print their stems, they end up with a lot of like you get vocals, and they're just like in the mix, they're quiet because with the bus compressor working, like they're underneath everything else. But then when they're printed like solo, they're 10 dB louder or something like that. And they're crazy bright and sizzly, and it sounds fake. I don't like something to sound fake live. So if that's the case, then I will tame the top end down. I'll make it match my live vocals, like the tone, the timbre, everything, the compression level if I can. I've never added an expander because I'm not like actually trying to use those as lead instruments, but
right.
I just pretend like they're being played. So if it's perk tracks, I send them to my drum bus, and I pretend like if a perk player was on stage, how loud would I want this? If it's a synth keys part, I just pretend it's, these are my synths, like there's another keyboard player on stage, and I'm gonna mix that just like it. And same for backing vocals. Hopefully they're like clean backing vocals with maybe just some reverb on them, and I just pretend like it's another background vocal.
True. Okay. Well, I think that wraps up all the questions. If we missed one, go ahead and throw it in there now, and we'll get to it. But
yeah,
on to the encore. Let's just go ahead and rip the Band-Aid off. So a lot of people are asking about the Madison Square Garden show. And at some point, the PA shut off. So walk us through what happened. And then somebody was also asking how you did the recording feed.
Yeah, I was mixing. This is towards...
I think we glitched out.
Yeah.
Someone was asking
how
how we didn't lose the recording feed.
So this is like...
Go for the whole thing.
Okay.
I'm going to shut up now and let you talk.
Oh, my internet is unstable. Let's see. Hold on.
It happens.
Oh, is that your internet or mine? Okay. I think we're back. We're clear now.
We're good.
Anyways,
Go.
when that was happening, it was towards the end of the show. I think there were 4 songs left, or this was the 3 songs or something like that. Right when Theo's doing a crowd participation moment, all of the lights around me turned off and the sound went away. And I thought there's a power outage in the building. But when I looked around, everything else was still working, and my world was all dark. And so we honestly don't know what the problem was. I think we can attribute it to a power failure at front of house, like for the audio, or just a power supply that failed, a PSU that failed somewhere in the computer. And I'm not going to say what kind of console it was, but
to clarify, it was not an Allen Heath.
It was not Allen and Heath.
It was a newer digital console that is well known.
Yeah. But it came back on its own after about a minute of me having a heart attack. Because when that happened, it's like your computer just shuts down. Like there's nothing I could do. I had a spare engine next to me on the floor, but that takes a few minutes to patch in, and it just started rebooting before I thought about even doing that. And so it rebooted, audio came back, and it was pretty much back to where it was. It was the last saved point in the show file, or no, the last state the console was in. So I was fine. Like I didn't lose anything except some reverbs, which never came back because it was on the backup power supply.
Yeah, because you said everything came back like pretty dry, right? Maybe just
EQs and gains. It was a little different. I lost my waves and I lost effects. So we mixed the last 3 songs like dry. And I, rather than like try to restart it again and get the effects back, which could have ended poorly, I just decided to leave it. And that's kind of a lesson I've learned. Like, man, if something is working and it could be a little better, but the alternative is like, I could possibly also like completely stop the show if I try to reboot it. The better option is just to leave it and let the show go on and do less, So thankfully the console came back right before the band came back in during this crowd participation moment. And the band on stage actually never knew that we lost front of house. I think most people
in-ears were still on, right?
Yeah. Everything else was fine. They thought they didn't know anything happened until after the show when I walked in white as a ghost, and told Jack what happened. But it happened at a really good spot though. Like it was at a point when everyone was singing along. So it was almost as if I just muted Theo's vocal mic for a minute and then turned it back on. But that was that. The recording, I was recording off the console as my primary record. And so I lost that for the minute and a half that I was down or something. But we were recording a backup directly off the head amps, off the stage rack. So I was able to just splice in that minute and a half into the recording. So didn't lose anything. Had audience mics, everything. The only reason I wouldn't do that as my primary is because you can't send the mix. You can't save the mix or any buses or process signals that way. So whenever I record anything like virtual soundcheck, I like to save my rough mix, my live mix in there with it.
Yeah, Adam said so. We were recording sends coming from monitors.
Yeah, no, I wasn't. It was actually I used a backup at front of house that was off the stage rack. We had an analog split at that show, so monitors was like they never even knew anything happened. It was all my side of the analog split was dead when I lost power. But yeah, so that's
I feel like even if they would have lost in-ears, like as cool as those guys are and as highly as you speak of them, like they would have got through it just fine with something. Because I went to there was Need to Breathe was playing in Birmingham one time, and there was like tornado warnings in the area, and we were at the show, and all the power went out So they literally grabbed all their acoustic instruments and just sat like downstage center. And it was one of the best shows I've ever seen at Workplay in Birmingham.
Yeah, yeah.
Just
That
because,
might be tough to do in an arena, but
totally.
uh,
But
yeah,
still,
I'm glad we didn't have to find out what would have happened. I mean, if it was catastrophic, I would have gotten that second engine out and we would have figured it out. But it was also towards the end of the show, so
yeah.
Yeah, but always have a backup console and a backup recording, because that was a live recording. Obviously, would have really sucked if we missed that. But yeah, that's honestly one reason I'm a relatively new DLive user, and that's one reason I'm using DLive, because there's no reliability issues, and everything I've heard, it can do everything I need it to do, and more. But yeah, a console's functionality, and then its reliability, and then the cost and size, like the physical footprint of it. Those are kind of the three things I look for in a console. But yeah, the DLive stuff, like the C1500 is so small, it's crazy that can be that powerful. Or the engine is powerful, and that's just one of the controller surface options. But yeah, with Cory, we're trying to keep everything as small and tight and efficient as possible, and so that's where we're going. Maybe we'll use it with Vulfpeck when we come back after the apocalypse.
Yeah,
TBD.
hopefully sooner than later.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, cool. Well, I think that sums it up, man. So, Jake, thank you
Yeah.
so much for hanging out with me for almost 2 hours now.
Dude, thank you for having me.
Felt like it went by for like 10 minutes.
Yeah, I've wanted to do this for a while, so this is pretty fun to have this, opportunity, and hopefully I'll do more. We'll see. I'm stoked for the other sessions you're doing.
Yeah, I've got Chris Miller will be April 17th. I think it's 3 p.m. Central Time. Check the channel. We've got the stream already set up and everything, and then Drew Thornton, front of house for Billie Eilish. She's a regional, very small artist right now. He's doing his thing coming up soon with Allen and Heath, so stay tuned to Allen and Heath socials, and they'll make sure you can see when Drew's doing his thing, and I'm looking forward to both of them. So with that, I'll let you guys get back to quarantine. I'm about to be on my 5th lunch in between my 2nd snack, and then back to bed.
Yeah.
So everyone stay safe out there. Oh yeah, go ahead.
If you want to extend this, just hit me up on Instagram. Like, you could send me a direct message, or it's probably better just to comment on this post or whatever if you have other questions, and I'm happy to answer them.
Yeah, sure. Do you want to? What's your Instagram? Is it just your name?
Yeah,
right?
it's at Jake Hartsfield. Yeah, that is my Instagram handle, so should be easy to find. But
Go give him a follow.
Sweet.
All right, guys. All right. That's right, everybody. Solo in place. So y'all have a good afternoon, and hopefully we'll catch y'all on the next one.
Cool. See you guys.
See ya.